Believe it or not, I actually have a concentration in chemistry with a Bachelor of Arts degree in insurance, which means I was trained, actuarial science I should say. I was trained to run insurance companies. You know, that's what I was going to do when I got out of school. Go to Allstate, State Farm, get in there and run it. Now, two things. Probably would have made a whole heck of a lot more money than I'm making now. But I probably would have hated it. As a football player in the summers, a coach would always get us jobs working in the inner city of Atlanta, Georgia. And first job he got me, I came home my freshman year and worked at Sears and Roebuck. But my sophomore year, I called my mother and father and said, look, I'm not coming home. And I could hear my mother in the background telling my father, you tell him to come home. And my dad said, well, why do you want to stay in Atlanta? I said, Dad, I need to know what it's like to be out here on my own before you throw me out. So I went back to the coach, and he says, you got a job. We got you a job working at Kennedy Center. My group was 5, 6, and 7-year-old boys. And I loved it. You would go to the gym, and in the morning you would see the sections. You would see the teenagers, the middle schoolers, 6th graders, and then you would see this section of 5, 6, and 7-year-old boys, and I mean they were all over the place. So I started working with kids, and I loved it. I mean, I really loved it. But, you know, as you play football, you think things are going to happen for you. And I ain't trying to say, you know, I don't want to toot my horn, but I was a good nose guard. You know, I was a good nose guard. But those things didn't happen. You know, everybody thinks, you know, the NFL is going to come calling. I remember a guy came down and he timed us. You know, he put special socks on and all of that stuff. Timed us. Boom, nothing happens. Heart gets broken, but then reality sets in. Coach asked me to come back and coach, so I went back to Morehouse and coached for 2 years. Then I got the chance to come home. Went around for a bit. Didn't really find out where I fit in. Worked at McDonald's. College graduate. Working at McDonald's. I see y'all shaking heads, but let me tell you, I was in the management trainee program though. All right. I wasn't just out there shaking fries, although they do make you do all of that. But, you know, my best friend told me, hey man, they got a job at Summit County Juvenile Court. Why don't you come and try it out? I said, all right. I went, and I remember going in, I filled out the application, and when I went there, people were telling me, you won't get the job, because usually the interns that have worked here, they give them jobs. It was an intake community worker, which was nothing more than a grunt for probation officers. So I went and filled out the application, and they called me back. And I'll never forget this, because this is why I think I got the job. In this group interview, and everyone who gets it's about 7 people. Who likes a group interview? Okay. Y'all can hear me, that was my thing. They said, you got a group interview? I said, that's cool. Went in and talked. One lady who hadn't said anything, she asked me a question. What type of kid couldn't you work with? And it was a test we had to take. And I put on the test an adolescent, homosexual, cross-dressing, gang involved, chain smoking, lactose intolerant, bipolar, drug addicted skinhead. And she looks at me, she said, why did you answer that question like that? I said, because I don't think there is a youth that I can't work with. And she said, we'll be in touch. Got the job, rest is history. Worked at Summit County Juvenile Court for over 26 years. Then I started working with drug and alcohols. I went back because drugs and alcohol became a major thing in the youth that I was dealing with. I'm not talking 50%. Okay? Now they don't like putting down 90%, 100%, but I'm telling you, it's in the high 90s of youth that are either directly or indirectly involved with substance use. It is something. And that's why I asked a question about marijuana this morning, because that's the key. But I started doing that. So we began to have problems with youth, and especially minority youth getting involved with the courts. So we began to look at something that would keep that from happening. A few years ago, our judge put together a program that actually went to Chicago. And we went to this place called the Peace and Blood Center in the city of Chicago. And the gentleman that ran the Peace and Blood Center there, his name is Father Kelly. Coolest guy you'd ever meet. And we were going there that day to look at peace circles in the city of Chicago with gang youth. We walked up these steps and the boys were there shooting pool. And I don't know if you've ever been in a section of Chicago. Everyone talks about gangs. But gangs everywhere else is nothing like it is in Chicago. You will meet gang members in Chicago that will tell you, my great-grandfather was a GD, gangster disciple. You meet that. Latin Kings. We went to one place where the guy said, if you walk on that side of the street and you're not with the right gang, you take your life in your hands. Understand what I'm saying? I'm talking a normal city street that if you are in one gang or the other, you won't walk on that side of the street. So we're there, and we walk up the steps, and you hear kids talking, and they're playing shooting pool, and when we walk in, everything gets quiet. Because young men that are involved in gangs are very aware of a lot of things. And they are very aware when individuals that they don't know come into their space. So we look, we walk around, we talk. One of them looks at me, I give him the universal sign. What's the universal sign? Anybody know what the universal sign is? What's up?
There it is.
Universal. Yeah, there you go. You got it, try it, you got it. Okay. Universal. And let me tell you how universal is. I'm standing on the corner in Durban, South Africa. A guy pulls up in a Datsun. I look at him and say, hey, what's happening? We're not even speaking the language, but he knew. But we began to sit down, and I saw these young men who were gang involved. They began to put this peace circle together. They put the pieces of the circle together. Father Kelly, just all he did with them, now he taught them how to do the process. But the great thing about peace circles is once you get into it, if you're doing it correctly, the youth that are involved with you will begin to take these principles and do it themselves. And we saw them set up this circle, which consisted of values, guidelines, rules of engagement, the talking pieces that they used. And here we are with these gang boys. I don't want to make you think they did because I love them. Okay. If I could deal with them all the time, that's what I would do. But they take chimes and they hit these chimes and they chime this circle in. When I saw that, and we begin to go through the circle process, and they get to the part where they're doing storytelling and they're asking about needs and asking questions, and I hear one boy say, I don't know what y'all need. I just need somebody to love me. Now understand what I'm saying to you. I'm sitting next to a young gentleman and I hear something. And I say, hey, did I just hear a gun go off? And he's like, yeah, that's probably what you heard. Like, stupid, that's what you heard, man. What you mean? It's Chicago. And to hear this young man say, I need somebody to love me. And not to hear him get ridiculed by the other men, the young boys that were in the group. To hear them accept that. And some of them said, you know what, I need that too, man. When I saw that happen, I knew that process was the process for me. And we began to do Peace Circle trainings. So this is how it begins. I mean, we come in here, and the training takes anywhere. For me to get trained, it was a 5-day training. We've kind of condensed it down to 3. But it's still so much. But the first thing you get is you'll begin to see things like this. And we always tell the individuals that are there, thank you. Because most of the individuals that will engage in the Peace Circle process are volunteers. And they come from all walks of life. And how the Peace Circle is used in Akron is we're trying to keep young people from getting involved in the juvenile justice system. Because you know that once you get in, it's hard to get out. Now, when I was growing up, if me and you got in a fight, I'd probably tan you. But what would happen? Our mothers, your mother would come to my house, and they sit on the porch, and they say, you two make up. Actually happened. Jerome Delaney, me and my brother tore him up. His grandmother brought him over. We sat on the porch, and they said, look, we're not having this. We're not having this. You don't fight. You make up. You say you're sorry. And they went through that process. Now, you know what we say at the court? The losers file. If your son gets beat up, you're calling the court, and you're going to get a charge filed. And that charge could be assault. Have your kids break somebody's glasses. They can be charged with felonious assault. So we want to keep individuals not involved in the court. But the process that I'm using now is a process that gets individuals talking with very minimal work that you have to do. After you've trained, you see how it works. It's very minimal. Now we use this. It's called Introduction to the Circle. On Geese and Friends, our values, paper plate exercise. And this is kind of what we do in the beginning. Now we take the story from the geese. Everybody have heard the story about the Canadian geese? Okay, we call Canadian geese silly, right? But that V shows you the profound intelligence of the geese. As these geese fly, let me see if I can use the pointer. As they fly, this is by design. By them flying in this V, they increase their ability to fly, because they increase the drag by almost 70%. When he gets tired, this one will probably come to the front, because if you look at the drag is a lot lower on him than it is on the ones in front of him. So he comes to the front. When you hear them honk, They're encouraging one another. They're not ridiculing. Hurry up! You're flying too slow. They're encouraging. Come on, you can do it. We're with you. If one falls out, not one, but two will fly down and stay with that injured goose until he's either ready to fly back or he passes away. How much better would we be as people if we learned to encourage each other instead of ridiculing? So we learned that lesson from the geese. Whosoever is present are the right people to be here. Whenever we start, it is always the right time. Whatever happens is the only thing that could have happened. When it's over, it's over. We put people in the circle. And it's a regular circle. Things have been happening in circles for thousands of years. But it's always good to give a little bit of a personal account of why I think it is so profound. And I'll let you know those in a second. Now, I may go through some of these slides. But like you say, here's our agenda. But the history. It started in the 1970s. Now, they say the history is here, but when you really begin to look back and you look at ancient cultures, they get in circles all the time. We are starting to see individuals in Summit County that are coming from the Congo and from other parts of the world. Their refugees are coming into, refugees and political prisoners are coming to Summit County. And it's funny, you see them sitting in the front of their houses sometimes in circles. And they're talking and they're sharing their things that they do. So we're beginning to learn things from that. So in about 1970, that's when they started to make peace circles. And people began to get trained in peace circles. A person that came and trained us were two individuals that came from Minnesota. We were complaining about the cold. And I think we had 5 or 6 inches of snow the day they came down. And we said something to the guy, sorry about the snow and this, that, and the other. The guy said, you do realize we're from Minnesota, don't you? Okay. So we begin to look at those things. What began to happen is in order for us to create a need for our peace circle, we had to make the difference between restorative justice and restorative practices. And we began to look at that because we want to empower our community. And one of the ways, when I say restore, what does that, what vision does that bring to your head? Not what it means, but what vision, when you think of restore, comes to your head?
Renewing something.
Renew. Anyone else?
Second chance.
Second chance.
Healing.
Renew and a second chance. What does that entail? What'd you say?
Hope.
Someone said hope. But when we begin to talk about the justice system, or when we begin to talk about restoring things, a wrong that has been done, what does that always entail?
Time.
Victim and perpetrator. Victim and perpetrator. Now I'm going to tell you something. We're good at punishment in America. We're good at it. I mean, if you don't believe that we're good at it, don't go into our prisons. Just look at some of our history. Youngest person put to death in America. History, in American history, youngest person.
16. It's 13.
13. There may have been one 11, and it was a young lady, but it may have. But the youngest person, 13. You know what was his name? You remember his name? George Stinney. George Stinney. How long do you think his trial lasted? 4 hours. 13 years old, 4 hours. Electric chair. So we're good at punishment. And we begin to look at restorative justice, restorative practices, restorative philosophy. And what tends to happen is, in order for you to change the culture in your school, like for example, who in here are educators? Deal with a lot of bullying, right? One thing I know about bullying, everybody, either you were the bully, either you got bullied, or both. And whenever that happened, that can kind of fuel your attitude about what's happening. So the one thing that we're doing is we're beginning to look at restorative justice and restorative practices and philosophies. So we have to begin to change what we think about certain things. Punitive versus restorative. Punitive is usually authoritarian, stigmatizing, and very confrontational. When you begin to restore, this is your philosophy. Cooperative, collaborative, problem solving, and responsibility. You don't see any of that over here, do you? You don't see any of that. So these are things and philosophies that we began to change when we began to put peace circles in place. And like I said, I'm going through this. I had put it together for you, but for some reason it's not coming up on the computer. One thing we always want to do is we want to empower. In your schools, or wherever you are, wherever you work with youth, what processes do you have in place that empower youth? And I'm asking a question. Y'all don't have no empowerment procedures, or you? Yes. What did you just do?
Oh, yeah, I give my kids a voice.
What did you just say?
I give my kids a voice.
You give your kids a what?
A voice.
Now imagine a process where everybody in the circle, or everybody in this process, has an equal voice. Doesn't matter if you're A student, B student. The techniques of the circle are, the only thing that I do as a circle keeper is set up the chairs, bring the children in the room, and get the circle process started. But that process entails all of us taking an equal step in creating that circle. And we sit down and we create it. So we go through a process where we create values and guidelines. Values are some of those things that never change, like confidentiality. We teach them about the talking piece. Respect the talking piece. Meaning if you don't have it, you don't talk. Now you would think that that would be very difficult. But the reason why it isn't is because everyone comes together and they create the value of the talking piece. We ask individuals sometimes to bring their talking pieces in. During the training, we have something called the memento circle, where you bring in something from home. I've done a number of trainings, and I can't tell you the number of times people bring in mementos or things that were meaningful to them, and they break down. I break down. I break down every circle. You know, I tell the trainers that I'm with, you know what, I don't have no tears today. But every time a person goes around and puts something, a piece of themselves in that circle, and they tell you why it's important to them. And I'm telling you, you get some of everything. We had a lady bring in, I saw her come in the door and she had this old, I mean, it was a duffel bag. And I'm like, oh man, I hope that's not her memento. And she set this duffel bag down and we started to go around and we got to her and she pulled out, and you know when somebody brings something, an old blanket in, the first thing you say, oh, it's moth eaten, and she bringing that old dirt. You know, you thinking this in your head. Now, I didn't say that. But she brought this blanket out. And when she told us that that blanket was the blanket that followed her and her mother and her brother every time they were homeless, every time they got kicked out of a house, every time they got kicked out of a shelter, and you see someone put that down in the center of a circle that everyone has created, do you see where the power comes in? I'm giving you a piece of me. My father gave me something that I bought in. One of these days, when I get the courage and I can do it and not cry, I'll put something in the circle that my wife gave to me. She's seated there in the back. But you do that. And you learn a piece of everyone. So they bring those things in and they put those things down in the circle. And the circle can, like I say, it can consist of everyone. But when you begin to do those things, when you can share a piece of yourself and everyone's respectful, that's empowering. And it is especially empowering when you're doing it with high school students. When you're doing it, we're even doing middle school. We're not doing them as extensively in middle school, but we are having discussion circles where we bring middle school kids in and we talk to them with about the same things, and we use the same techniques that we use with the older kids. And we also do this with families. Personal story. Got a young man, put him in my circle. Now, to do your circle, you have to go out and you do your pre-work. So you go out and you get papers signed. You get things signed and commitments. And during that time, we give you the papers. We teach you how to do the paperwork and all that, because we want everyone to be committed to the circle. We tell you rules. We tell you what's going to happen. Now, this is the formal process when you're dealing with a system that wants this person. Maybe they may have committed a crime, and we're going through this circle to keep them from going further into the system. But when you're talking about having circles amongst yourselves, you must have agreement. Values, guidelines, you have agreement on those things. But I got this kid. Go to his house. I couldn't understand why he was court involved, because he was such a nice young man. I meet with him and his mother. In order to involve the community, we went to a local church and said, do you have space for about 6 or 7 people? Call up his dad. Say, hey, we're doing this circle for your son. Could you be there? Now, dad and mom weren't living together. And when I said I'm going to call his dad, what does mom do? Call him for what? I said, ma'am, I asked him who he wants to have in there. He said his dad. Bring his dad and mom in. Didn't plan this. But this is the power of when you do your circle training. Somehow it came up where father was here, the boy was here, and the mother was right there. and he was seated between his mother and father. Now, this boy was about 6'2". I had to stop when we were going through the process. I said, Mom, Dad, look at your son. Look at your son. He was touching his dad, and then he would touch his mom. I mean, he was acting like a little kid. And I asked him, because you do your pass and you go around the circle. And the pass was, how are you feeling now? And we got to him, and he said, I forgot what it felt like to be with my mother and father. Just for a moment. Just a moment sometimes. It takes to keep crazy stuff from happening. Did it last? No. But he got that moment. He's got that moment. So you get into things like that when you begin to create these peace circles. So let's just say, for example, we're doing a peace circle here. Now for me, when I do them in detention, the guidelines, I like to call them rules of engagement, I set them down. Because they're in a controlled setting, they really can't go anywhere. But I do let them put things. But confidentiality, one thing we tell them, what happens in the circle stays in the circle. It's respect the talking piece and respect each other. Okay? Now, when you do things in a setting where people may be hostile, watch the talking pieces that you bring in. Okay? You don't want to bring in a stick. Okay? I got this little, it's a toucan type thing, and they love that, so I bring that in. But I began to let them do the values. Guess, and this is coming from a kid out of detention. Guess what his value was? Listen to this. Now, currently, he's in prison. Because this was about 3 years ago. He got bound over. But this is what he wanted to put in the circle. Speak to inspire. This is a young man who was in detention for aggravated robbery. And I was expecting him to put down a guideline like one of the kids put down a guideline, no farting. Okay? Now you laugh, but when you in that's a big thing. So he put it down. Another one. Stay humble through criticism. These are from youth, 15, 16, and 17 years old, who a lot of times we don't give them credit. So these are all of the things, and I've done these things in detention. So if you had to put down a value, what would you say? What would be a value that you would want that would make this process run smooth?
No laughing at me.
What'd you say?
No laughing at me.
No laughing. No laughing.
Use positive words
Use positive words.
and respect.
Respect. Anyone else?
No judging and
Non-judgmental, no judging. Now, you have a circle of individuals. You're all getting the opportunity to put, and you physically put these things down. We provide paper. The cheap thing that we'll do is we go to Save-A-Lot or somewhere and get those cheap paper plates. I like to get big paper plates for the values, smaller paper plates for the guidelines. Now what happens is every time you do a circle with that same group, what do? You put that one down and you reiterate them. Another big one that we have, no cell phones. When you're here, we want you all in. You can't be all in with your cell phone. Which I've been watching this group through the day. You guys are wonderful. I haven't seen maybe one person that's on their cell phone. So you're here, and that means you're all in. But a cell phone can tear down your circle. A person can get a text on that cell phone, and that's it. So we put all these values and guidelines down. We're done at what time? 1:30. Ooh, 1:30. Okay. Now, did I mess up again? I'm just going to leave it like this. Now, this is one of our main premises here. Communities should not measure the success of any community based initiative upon what happens to the wrongdoer. You should not base your communities on that. Rather, they should measure the impact of the community based initiatives on victims, strengthening families, building connections within the community, on reinforcing community values, on mobilizing community action to make the community safer. Your circle process seeks to bring victim, victimizer together. Sometimes that's difficult. We've used our circles with parents and children that are having extreme difficulties. I thought we were going to have a bigger space that I could actually do a mock circle, but it's a little difficult. But this is a process where you learn the values, you learn the guidelines, you learn how to introduce the talking piece, you learn the storytelling phase. This is when you begin to get in the ins and outs of what brought the individuals to the circle. Now, in a school, that could just be a fight. Because we had a fight at one of our high schools. Huge fight. I get called to do the circle. I mean, about 20, the fight was so large it made the paper. So I get called to do the circle. I just get the names and I go in to do the circle. Well, I didn't really know who was who in the circle. So I get to do this circle. So I see these 5 girls waiting for me to come in, and I think that they're friends. So I put the chairs in the line. I put the centerpiece, because you'll have a centerpiece. I put down the talking piece. I said, okay, these are our values and our guidelines. This is what we're going to do. And in the sake of time, I said, we got confidentiality, no cell phones, respect the talking piece, and because they're fighting each other, no judgments, and respect each other. I didn't know that these were the 5 main girls fighting each other. There was 3 against the 2. So we put together, and we go through all this. One of the girls said one great thing, and I always remember this. I said, what's your value? She said, don't let anyone else start my storm. I was like, I said, you got to say that again. She said, don't let anyone else start my storm. And we began to talk about what happened, and you know what came out, this whole peace circle thing? They found out that it was this one guy, put them together, had them all fighting. They were like, well, wait a minute, I thought no, it was either. Now here they are getting ready to go and get a record. But the thing was, it was through the summer. And y'all know, in the summer, it's not a problem. But the second we come together and I see you in school, it's on. So we were able to divert something that was going to happen just with the circle. Now, we purposely involve the community. We want to get in neutral territory. So we usually try to go to community centers. Our schools have been really good about that, allowing us to use there. We have some churches that have like community centers cooked to them. But wherever you have space, you can go and you can learn this process. But it works really well. Are there any questions so far? Yes.
Have you ever had trouble with like
We really don't. But when you have, if you're in a school situation where the kids are going to be there, you can sometimes do that. But the reason why we want to involve parents is because too many parents, we've given permission for them not to be involved. Because we say, you know what, parents aren't going to be there, we shouldn't penalize the child. When that parent is involved, because I'm telling you, any good work that you do, that parent can tear it down in a second.
Well,
Yeah.
I just had, oh, sorry. The kids that I'm thinking about, and actually she was in my neighborhood one of this, like, their parents are so either drug addicted or out of their minds or not even at home half the time. Like, I'm just trying to think, but our school's trying to be like politically correct and they're coming down on me about doing things without parent permission, but yet I have no parents' permission. Like, I was just curious how that works.
Now when the court was dealing with the situation, it was a little different because the judge said you're gonna go to the circle. And then you know what they do? They come and you ask them, well, why are you here? Because the judge told me to be here. Okay. You get that. But when you're reaching out to parents, because I'm going to tell you something, if you can get a hold of them, I've worked with parents and youth for over 20 years. I've never met a parent that when I sit down and say to them, now do you love your kid? They're going to all say, yeah, about that. That's one of those. I said, do you want the best for your child? I've very few parents that have said no.
I get intimidated is what I find by the process, because then they know they have
But
to
see,
reveal some things.
no, in the circle, understand this, and this is the big thing you got to understand about a circle. And it's going to be hard for educators. You're not a therapist.
I am a parent.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's going to be doubly hard for you. Because you're going to hear some things and you're going to be saying, oh my gosh, that's trauma. We got to deal with that. You don't. Now what we tell our parents, because understand, we're training lay people. We tell them, look, don't go in here and you're hearing somebody talking about things thinking you have to deal with it. You know.
That does change.
Yeah, look, I'm a counselor. You know, therapist too. I don't, they'll say something in the circle and I say, okay, I'm a mandated reporter. If you're going to kill somebody, if you're selling some drugs, if you don't think, we tell them that in the beginning. When you're getting parents together, but when you tell people what stays here, what's said here stays here, very empowering. The lady said today, we had a mother in the circle who told her kids, and she said, I've never said this before. You see what marijuana did to me. Now here's a young man who we have been trying to get clean for months. Even though his mother was still actively smoking marijuana, when she said that to him, that was 100 years of conversation said by that one person. Because every kid's got that person that's got their ear. And when she said that, it changes. So the circle is a very, very safe place for people to come to. It's formal because you teach values, guidelines, you have your rules. You'll usually come in, I usually start off with a poem or something, and I get kids to ask, like one of the things I used to start off with, life is like a coin. You can spend it any way you want, but you can only spend it once. What do you think of that? I had a group of gangs in detention fighting each other. Read it in the cold within. You've heard that poem, right? Everybody's heard it. 6 humans trapped by circumstance and bleak and bitter cold. Each possess a stick of wood, or so the story is told. You've heard that, right? Okay, well, it's about people with sticks, and the fire goes out. And because this person hated that person, he says, you know what, I'm not putting my stick on that log. Because if he gets warm, and I hate him, I'd rather be cold than warm him up. They all die. Okay? They all die. To hear them weave that together, talking about their gang issues. Now, this stuff may not last after detention. But that one moment, It gives them something to go back to. You had your hand up, man?
Yes, I was just wondering how effective is the peace circle in strengthening relationships? Because oftentimes people are offended by someone, and that person never had an opportunity to defend themselves and they never knew that person's true intention.
Okay.
Sometimes people can take something personal, but
Right.
if they came together and talked it out, then you would have got a better understanding of what that person do the peace circle give that?
Yes. The one thing that the peace circle does is, first of all, it's not a one-time thing. Okay? When you first come together, you build the circle, guidelines, values, and you kind of tell everyone how this process is going to proceed. You may have 3 circles, you may have 10, but that's based on the individuals in the circle. So you don't go there first time you met, hey, my name is Myron, and I want to know why you don't like him. Okay? No. Okay? You don't jump into it that quick. You'd be surprised at giving people things to think about. Example, in detention, boys fighting each other. I'm with the lady who helped me to be, her name is Keisha Myers. Wonderful organizer, big person behind the driving force in peace circles in Akron, Ohio. I said, Keisha, what are we going to do? They've been in here fighting. Now, they didn't shut the hall down. But they knew we were coming. So in order to get out of their cells, they said, we got to do the peace circle. Mr. Lewis, and they set up the chairs. I'm seeing them looking at each other across the chairs. And I just asked the question, who in here has a great relationship with their father? Whoever wants to be the first to speak, pick up the talking piece and start. The only person that had a great relationship with his father was me. Now let me tell you something. Fighting back the tears in that moment was difficult. Not because I felt for them, but I could only feel where my life would have gone if I wouldn't have had my father. Great mother, great brother, great sister, great wife. You think about those things. But what happened with those boys was they saw that his experience is just like mine. They never had one more and understand this, that was not my intent. I just didn't want them fighting in there with me. Okay? Because I tell them my motto is, and I'll say this and I won't do it, if I have to put my hands on you, I'm going to hurt you. That's what I tell them, But that wasn't my intent. But to watch those walls, and I can tell, I'll tell you one more thing. I had a gangbanger. He comes to me the first time, he says, Mr. Lewis, I want you to know something. I'm an OG. Everybody knows what OG means, right? Original gangster.
Old grandma.
Oh, he said old grandma. So he says, I'm an OG. Now at the time he was 17, he was going to be 18 in about 2 more months. He said, Mr. Lewis, I was an OG at 16. Okay? He want me to know that. So he's kind of telling me this. That doesn't usually happen, right? Okay? But some things had happened, he had did some things. So, and then with the other kids, I would watch him in detention. He ran it. We get him in our circle, and he begins to break down, not cry, but I could see the wall coming down. And I knew the wall came down because one day my wife had bought me some cologne because she makes sure I'm a football player. I ain't worried about no cologne. But she keeps me, on kill. So I walk in, and he walks past me and says, Mr. Lewis, that's a nice cologne. And I'm like, wow. But let me tell you what the Peace Circle did as a therapist. because I also was his individual counselor because I did his substance abuse assessment. By us sitting in that circle and him watching me not be judgmental when they said things, it gave him the courage to come to me and say, hey, Mr. Lewis, me, OG, I got some stuff I'm really dealing with. And he came, and the circle process was the greatest when he himself in our circle with kids who would tell you, Mr. Lewis, on the streets, he doesn't even put his hands on anybody. You know what that means, right? He tell you to do it. He said he don't even touch nobody. To hear him say to that group of boys, I need y'all help to be a better person, is why I believe so much in this process, and it's why I will teach it. Get my team together. We'll come down 2 days, 2.5 days. We will teach you this process. We can tailor this process, to what you want us to do. So it is a wonderful thing. An hour and a half for me, 1 hour. I can probably do 2 and just tell you, but I'll just give you one parting thing, and then if there's any more, are there any more questions does anybody have?
I was just wondering if you could maybe just do a quick rundown of what they generally look like.
Okay, general rundown of a peace circle.
Yeah.
Probably 9 to 10 people, or how many you have. You have 2 circle keepers. The circle keepers are the ones that kind of keep things going. Like, say for instance, if you and I, what's your name, sir?
Gary.
If Gary and myself are circle keepers, I start off the question, Mary had a little lamb, fleece was white as snow. What do you think of that? And we make a pass. It'll go through. It goes through the pass, then the last time the talking piece gets to Gary. Gary may summarize what he's heard. Also as circle keeper 2, Gary is watching body language. He's watching attitudes. And so he might say, hey, what's your name?
Adam.
Adam, I noticed that you didn't want to say anything on this pass. Would you like to say something now? Because the circle keepers are the ones that kind of keep that going. We're the ones that keep everybody focused on the guidelines and the values. But this is what happens. As you begin to go through the process, the kids will take it over. They'll take it over. And they'll ask you, hey, can I be circle keeper 1? And sometimes the circle keepers are sitting next to each other. Sometimes they'll be apart. But it's just a group of people in the circle who have all come to agreement. Okay. Outcomes is not important. Outcomes, this is what I'm saying, outcomes in the beginning is not important. But I can tell you that rarely have we not reached an outcome in a circle. When you get people that are in agreement to how something is going to run, most problems in the school, if you look at agreement between teachers, we had a horrible agreement between the school system, the court system, and the police. Most cities and municipalities, those 3 do not work in agreement. They work independent of each other. Police will tell you, juvenile court, you grab them in juvenile court, they let them go. By the time I get back out on the street, he's already back out. So, and you've heard it. Now I hear people shaking their heads, and they're not from Akron. So it's universal. So you have a group of people that come together in agreement, and they build a process where conversation is going to be safe. Confidentiality is sacred. And judgment is non-existent. That's what the circle should look like. And that's what we try to do when we do the trainings and do those things.
You said there's like a talking piece in the center, so it's kind of like a
Could be anything.
cool.
Could be anything.
Someone
Like I
just picked
said, I couldn't bring, I had a rock that I got,
Oh,
okay?
yeah.
You know, I had a rock that I got. I had a little, you know, a little teddy bear. Miss Myers told me, Lou, you know, these boys don't want to see no little stuffed animal in detention. That was the favorite talking piece. And that, you know, it had clothes on it. You know, I would tell them, look, don't take the clothes off of my bird. But they would do those things, and it was just a wonderful time. I got closer to them, and they got closer to me. I've never had a circle where I didn't leave and feel better about it. So that's generally, and I'm sorry that, you know, my PowerPoint kind of didn't, because it's a training and because it takes a while, it's one of those things that we would either have to come and maybe do a circle for you to see it, but it is a process that you have to have agreement on, and two, but the discussion circles that we're doing in our middle schools are really working well, because now you have a place where kids who normally won't talk to people will come together and talk. Because look, I don't know if it's like that now, but when I was in school, the football team hung out with the football team, A students hung out with the A students. The kids we called burnouts hung out with the burnouts. The marijuana smokers kind of hung out with everybody because everybody was smoking weed. But people tend to hang together. But this process can bring them all together. Yes, ma'am.
How long does an average group last, or how do you know when it's time to end it?
You know, that's hard because it's one of those things where if you get to a point and you're making progress, do you want to end it? But what we try to do is we let people know that you'll come in and it'll be anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half, because we always want to be respectful of people's time.
I mean, as far as not just the one time.
Oh.
Are you talking like
It
10
depends.
times, 3 times?
Well, if
Or
you're
how do you
having,
know when to end that?
like, there's a number of different types of circles. Like if it's a intervention circle, that may have to go on until the process has been resolved. So some circles have gone over 10 times. When you're talking discussion circles, which are just people getting together and talking about a specific subject, you can put a limit on them, saying we're going to talk about bullying, violence, you know, and abuse and those type of things like that. So you can do that. Anyone else?
So how do we get you?
Oh, I'm glad you asked. No, I do have cards available. You can give me a call and let me know how we can do that. Because like I say, I'm in Akron.